The night her dad called me a failed soldier in front of 20 people, I smiled so hard my jaw hurt. I heard the word fail like it was shouted down a long hallway, even though he said it in this calm, amused voice like he was talking about the weather. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My fiance's hand slipped out of mine under the table, and everyone at that big, polished oak table went quiet, except for the clink of cutlery and my own heartbeat in my ears. What I didn't know in that moment was that this insult wasn't just an insult, it was a warning shot. It was him telling me that he'd already decided who I was and what I deserved, and it was the start of a chain of lies, sabotage, and betrayal that would slowly burn my entire life down until I decided I was done being the quiet, grateful veteran and chose revenge instead. But before I tell you about the revenge, I need to tell you about the waiter. Because right after her dad called me a failed soldier, the young waiter who'd been pouring water and refilling wine glasses all night suddenly straightened up, snapped his heels together, pulled his shoulders back, and stared right at me like I was his commanding officer. "Ma'am," he said, voice shaking a little but loud enough for the whole room, "permission to speak freely?" Every eye in that private dining room turned to him. Emily's dad frowned. The other guests looked annoyed. Emily squeezed my thigh under the table so hard it hurt. I looked at him, really looked, and my breath caught Miguel, Private First Class Miguel Alvarez. 5 years ago, he'd been a skinny kid shaking like a leaf while rockets landed outside the base. Now he was here, in a white shirt and black waistcoat, holding a tray of sparkling water like a shield. "It's you," he whispered. "Captain Parker." And that was the moment everything shifted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Hannah Parker. I'm 32. I live just outside of Richmond, Virginia, and for 6 years I served in the U.S. Army. I was a medic, then a team leader, and eventually I pinned on captain. I did 1 deployment to Kuwait and 2 to Afghanistan. I left with a medical discharge, a drawer full of meds I barely touch, 1 scar down my left thigh from shrapnel, and a brain that doesn't always know the war's over. I met Emily at a charity 5K for veterans, one of those early autumn mornings that start cold and get warm too fast. I was standing by the coffee table, tugging my sleeve down to hide the thin white scars on my wrist from a stupid night years earlier, and she just appeared next to me with this huge, bright smile. "You look like you drink your coffee black," she said. I blinked. "Is that a compliment or an accusation?" "Compliment," she grinned, handing me a cup. "They keep all the good stuff back here, away from the amateurs." She had messy blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, a faded college hoodie, and leggings with little stars on them. I remember thinking she looked like a Sunday morning, cozy and soft and impossible to be mad at. We ran together. Well, she ran. I jogged and then limped toward the end, my leg doing that thing where it reminded me of every bad decision I'd made overseas. She slowed down without making a big deal of it. She cracked jokes when she saw my jaw tighten. She didn't flinch when a car backfired near the finish line and I stopped cold, heart slamming. She just slipped her hand into mine and stood there with me until my brain caught up and remembered we were in Virginia, not Kandahar. By the time we crossed the finish, she knew my name, what unit I'd been in, why I walked with a slight limp, and that I was still waking up from nightmares most nights. By the end of the week, she knew my coffee order and how I like my eggs. By the end of the month, she knew the exact pitch of my voice when I was about to push everyone away. She was marketing director for some tech startup back then, the kind that has kombucha on tap and beanbags instead of chairs. She came from money. I didn't really understand how much until later. I grew up in a small town in Ohio with parents who thought going out to Olive Garden was fancy. Emily grew up flying to Aspen for Christmas, but she never made me feel small about it, not at first. When she found out I was medically discharged, she got this angry look on her face. "They just tossed you out?" she asked, "after everything you did?" "They didn't toss me out," I said. "They gave me a ceremony and a folder and a pamphlet about transitioning to civilian life. It was very organized." She rolled her eyes. "Sounds cold." "It was," I admitted. "But they did what they had to do. I couldn't stay in, not with the leg and the other stuff." "The nightmares," she said softly. "Yeah, those." She squeezed my hand. You're not a failure, you know that, right? I shrugged. Some days, she looked straight into my eyes and said, very seriously, well, if anyone calls you that, they'll have to answer to me. I held onto that sentence longer than I should have. Our first real argument about her family happened about 6 months in. We were sitting on my crappy thrift store couch eating Chinese from the takeout boxes when she said, I want you to meet my parents. I nearly choked on my lo mein. Your parents, as in the people who raised you and pay for your random trips to Napa? She laughed. Yes, those ones. I wiped my mouth. Emily, I'm just figuring my life out here. I'm in community college with 18-year-olds who think Afghanistan is in Africa. I still keep my boots by my bed in case something explodes. I'm not really meet the parents material. They'll love you, she said quickly, too quickly. You're smart and kind, and you literally saved lives. My mom will cry. My dad will probably offer you a job before dessert. A job? Doing what? He does defense contracting, consulting. He loves military people. Something in her tone jolted me. It was a bit too eager, like she was trying to sell me on it. Is that why you like me? I teased. I'm your in-house veteran? She set down her chopsticks. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like you're asking if I have some weird savior complex. Her jaw tightened. I like you because you're you, not because of your uniform. I felt bad, instantly. I know, sorry, that was unfair. She sighed and leaned into me again. Just think about it. They've been asking to meet you. I put it off for another 6 months. Partly because I was scared of fancy people, and partly because I had this deep down feeling that once her world and mine collided, something would crack. Like I'd managed to keep what happened over there in a neat little box, and Emily's life was this bright, shiny room, and if they ever touched, the box would just leak everywhere. But time has a way of pushing you into corners. A year after we met, she proposed. She did it on a hike of all cliche places at a lookout point with a view of the river and the city skyline. My knee ached. I was sweaty and out of breath and feeling gross. And then she was fumbling in her jacket pocket with this nervous smile. Hannah, she said, voice trembling, you once told me you didn't know what your life would look like after the army. I don't know what my life will look like in 10 years either, but I know I want you in it. She pulled out a small, simple ring, silver band, tiny diamond, nothing flashy. My heart lurched. Will you marry me? She asked. For a second, every ugly memory tried to crowd in. Every time I'd thought about not coming home. Every time I'd believed I didn't deserve good things. But looking at her, pale hair stuck to her forehead, cheeks flushed, eyes wide and scared, I pushed all that down. Yes, I whispered. Yeah, of course, yes. She laughed and cried at the same time, sliding the ring onto my finger with hands that weren't quite steady. We just stood there, her forehead against mine, while the wind tugged at our clothes. 3 days later, she said, my parents want to take us out to dinner to celebrate. I felt my stomach drop. Okay, I said slowly. Sure, where? She named a restaurant I'd only ever driven past and stared at from my car. One of those places with white tablecloths and no prices on the menu, the kind of place you wear a blazer to, not a hoodie. They booked the private room, she added. Of course they did, I muttered. She heard the tightness in my voice. Hey, she cut my face. They're going to be thrilled. I promise. You say that like you're trying to convince yourself too. She hesitated, then exhaled. My dad can be intense, old school. But once he gets to know you, he'll be your biggest fan. He loves the military. He donates to like 5 veteran charities. He talks about service all the time. You're basically his dream. The way she said loves the military and not loves people in the military stuck with me, but I didn't push it. That Saturday, I put on the nicest dress I owned, one I'd bought for a friend's wedding. It was simple navy blue, hit just above the knee, and I paired it with low heels my ankle would tolerate. I stared at myself in the mirror, ring on my finger, hair pulled back in a low bun, and tried to reconcile the woman looking back at me with the one who'd crouched in dusty, bombed-out houses, covered in other people's blood. You look amazing, Emily whispered when she picked me up. She'd gone full glam, soft waves in her hair, red lipstick, a fitted black dress that made heads turn even as we walked through the restaurant lobby. We were led to the back, to a large private dining room with a long table already set, candles, crystal glasses, two waiters hovering in the background like well-dressed ghosts. Her parents were at the far end. I recognized her mother from pictures, slim, carefully highlighted hair, pearl earrings, a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit. She stood when she saw us, smile wide. "Hannah," she said, moving forward to kiss my cheek. "We finally meet." I tried not to flinch. "Mrs. Hayes, it's nice to—" "Oh, please call me Linda," she cut in. "Or Mom, if you want." She laughed as if that were a cute joke and not weird 5 seconds into meeting me. Her father stood more slowly. He was bigger than I'd expected. Broad shoulders, expensive suit that fit perfectly, silver hair cut close. His handshake was firm, maybe deliberately too firm. His eyes swept over me in one quick cataloging glance. "So you're the infamous Hannah," he said. His voice had that smooth politician quality. "Richard Hayes." "Yes, sir," I said automatically, then internally winced. "I mean, good to meet you." He smirked like he'd won some silent point. "Old habits die hard, huh?" I forced a smile. "Something like that." The rest of the guests were variations on a theme, a couple of Emily's aunts and uncles, her older brother and his wife, one of her dad's business partners. I shook a lot of hands. I answered the same questions I always answered when people heard Army. What was it like over there? Did you ever have to shoot anyone? Do you have PTSD? That one came from an aunt after 2 glasses of wine, said with this weird mix of curiosity and fear, like she was asking if I carried a weapon in my purse. Emily squeezed my knee under the table when I went quiet at that one. Dinner started harmlessly enough. Wine poured, bread baskets passed. Someone made a toast to love and new beginnings. Richard told a story about Emily as a toddler putting lipstick on the dog. Then, like a tide turning, the conversation shifted. "So, Hannah," one of the uncles said, "what exactly do you do now that you're back? Emily said you're in school?" I swallowed a bite of salmon. "Yeah, I'm doing a nursing degree. I figured I might as well use the skills I picked up while I was over there." "Nursing?" Richard repeated, tone neutral, but something in his eyes sharpening. "I thought you were an officer." "I was," I said. "But I did a lot of trauma care as a medic too before I commissioned." "So you went from being a captain to going back to school with kids?" He chuckled, but it wasn't a kind sound. "Seems like a step down." "Dad," Emily said softly. "It's okay," I lied, forcing my shoulders to relax. "It's different, but it feels right." "But why leave?" he pressed. "Why not stay until retirement? The pension alone is worth it." I took a sip of water. The stem of the glass felt slippery in my fingers. "I was medically discharged," I said. "Injury in my leg and some other stuff that made it hard to stay in." "Other stuff," he repeated. "You mean the mental side?" The table went very still. I could feel heat creeping up my neck. I glanced at Emily. She looked down at her plate. "Something like that," I said quietly. He leaned back. "You know, when Emily first told me she was dating a soldier, I pictured someone who did their 20 years. Someone who pushed through, not someone who taps out when it gets hard." The word hit like a slap. "Taps out." "Dad," Emily snapped, louder this time. "Don't." He waved a hand. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. We spend millions supporting our troops and they leave halfway through and go back to school on the taxpayer's dime. It doesn't exactly scream commitment." My fork clicked against the plate. My vision narrowed a little at the edges. "I did 6 years," I said, my voice even, too even. "And 3 deployments. I left because the doctors told me I couldn't stay, not because it got hard." He raised an eyebrow. "Doctors, right. I've seen plenty of men who game the system with a few stories and some tears. PTSD is the magic word these days." The word men snagged in my brain even as the rest of it was already burning. Game the system. Stories and tears. My chest felt tight. "Richard," Linda murmured, "maybe we should talk about something else." He swirled his wine. I'm just trying to understand what my future son-in-law will be living on when he decides he's had enough of his job. The table laughed. It took me a second to realize why. Oh, I said. You think actually I'm the one who served, not... Emily put a hand on my arm. Dad knows that, Hannah. He smiled at me, and there was nothing friendly in it now. I know exactly who you are, he said. You're the girl who did half a stint, took a payout, and now gets to wear the hero label without actually paying the full price. A failed soldier, living off the perks. And just like that, there it was. The word I'd been secretly, quietly, privately terrified of for years, served up to me like dessert in front of a room full of people. Failed. Something rang in my ears. My throat closed. My first instinct was to stand up, flip the table, and storm out. My second was to apologize, as if I'd done something wrong by not dying over there. I did neither. I smiled. I smiled so hard my jaw hurt. I smiled like I hadn't hurt him. I picked up my wine glass with a hand that only shook a little. Dad, Emily whispered, horrified, what is wrong with you? What? He said mildly. If she can't handle an honest question, how's she going to handle being married into this family? We don't do coddling here. I opened my mouth to answer, not sure what would come out, maybe something sharp enough to cut the air between us, when the waiter moved. He'd been hovering near the far wall with a pitcher of water, trying to make himself invisible, like all good waiters in expensive restaurants do in private rooms. But now he stepped forward, tray in hand, face pale. Ma'am, he said, voice trembling, permission to speak freely. My brain, already halfway down into fight or flight, snapped into a different gear, that phrase. The way he held himself, the way his eyes avoided direct contact but still flicked up and down like he was checking my hands for a weapon. I looked at him properly for the first time. He was maybe 26 now, olive skin, dark hair shaved close at the sides, a faint white scar along his jaw. He had that posture you can't fake, the straight spine, the squared shoulders, even in a stupid restaurant uniform. And under that nervousness, there was something else, recognition. My heart stuttered. Miguel? His mouth fell open. You remember me. My throat went tight. Private Alvarez. Emily's dad looked between us, irritation and curiosity wrestling on his face. What is this? The rest of the table was frozen, forks in midair. Miguel swallowed hard. Sir, I apologize, but I can't stand here and listen to you talk about her like that. Emily's dad's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Miguel's hand tightened on the tray until I thought the glass would crack. Then, very deliberately, he set it down on a side table, stood straight, and brought his hand up in a sharp salute. Ma'am, he said loud and clear, his voice carrying in the hush. With respect, you are the reason I'm standing here tonight. You are the bravest soldier I've ever met. Someone actually gasped. I had this weird, out-of-body moment watching myself sitting there in a navy dress while a waiter saluted me in a private dining room in Richmond. I'm sorry, I said automatically. You don't have to. He shook his head, eyes shining. Kandar Valley, Fob Sentinel. You dragged me out of a burning MRAP while we were taking fire. You stayed with me in the med tent all night, even though you'd been awake for like 36 hours. They gave you a Bronze Star, ma'am. They should have given you 2. The room spun. Memories I tried very hard to keep locked away cracked open, flashes of screaming, the smell of burning rubber and flesh, my hand slipping on blood as I yanked a limp body out of twisted metal. I hadn't even realized it was him. I'd done it on autopilot. Emily's dad's expression faltered, then hardened again. That's very touching, he said, sarcasm dripping from every word. Thank you for your service, Private, but... Oh, but nothing, Miguel cut in. The deference was gone now, replaced by a raw anger I recognized. Sir, with respect, you sit here in your nice suit calling her a failed soldier. She's the reason I get to see my mom. She's the reason I'm alive to pay my rent and work this stupid job and go to school at night. She didn't fail. The system failed her. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable. Somewhere near the door, I heard a soft chime. Someone getting a text, or maybe starting to record. I didn't look to see. Miguel's chest was heaving. You don't have to like her, but you don't get to say that about her, not while I'm in the room. I could see the manager hovering outside the glass door, panic on his face, unsure whether to intervene. Richard's face went red. "This is completely inappropriate. I will be speaking to your manager. You are done here." Miguel flinched just slightly. Being fired mattered to him, but he didn't lower his eyes. "Yes, sir," he said. "Maybe I am, but I'd rather be fired for telling the truth than keep silent while you insult my commanding officer." Commanding officer. The words landed like a bomb on something raw and open inside me. He looked at me again. "Ma'am, thank you for everything." Then he dropped the salute, grabbed the tray with shaking hands, and walked out. The room was suffocatingly quiet. I could feel 20 eyes on me, feel Emily's fingers digging into my leg under the table, feel my own pulse hammering at my temples. Emily's brother cleared his throat. "Dad, that was enough," Richard snapped. He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, that was quite the performance. You must be proud." I stared at him. "Proud? Yes, clearly you've told a very moving story to anyone who'll listen." Anger flared, hot and sharp. I've never met that man outside of a war zone. I didn't even recognize him until he said my name. He chuckled. "Of course not." Emily spoke up, voice shaking. "Dad, he knew her unit, her rank, where she was stationed. You saw—" "I saw some waiter trying to get a bigger tip," he said smoothly. "People will say anything these days, especially when veterans are involved. It's trendy." Something inside me snapped. "You think I asked him to do that?" I said. My voice was low and flat now, the way it had been on the radio when things went bad. "You think I enjoy being the center of attention like that? I spent the last 6 years trying not to be noticed. I wake up 3 nights a week with my sheets soaked in sweat. I drive 20 minutes out of my way to avoid fireworks stands. I sit with my back to the wall in every restaurant so I can see the exits. I didn't fail, Mr. Hayes. I did my job until my body and brain literally couldn't anymore. I left when staying would have gotten people hurt." He just looked at me, unimpressed. "And yet here you are, playing the victim at my daughter's engagement dinner." "Dad!" Emily shouted. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound too loud. "I need some air," I said, voice shaking now. "Excuse me." "Hannah." Emily reached for me, but I stepped back. "I'll be right back," I lied. I walked out of that room on legs that felt like they weren't entirely attached to my body. The hallway felt too narrow, the restaurant noise too loud. I found the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, sat down on the closed lid, and pressed my hands to my eyes until little white stars danced behind them. Failed soldier. He'd said it like it was a fact, like he had the right to define my entire life with 2 words over a plate of overpriced salmon. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the initial anger to burn out and leave a cold pit of something else, familiar shame, the stuff I thought I'd fought past in therapy. There was a soft knock on the stall door. "Hannah?" Emily's voice. "It's me." I didn't answer at first. She waited. "Can I come in?" she asked. I sighed and unlocked the latch. She slipped in, closed it, and we stood there, 2 grown women squeezed into a tiny space that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and perfume. Her eyes were red. Her mascara had smudged. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He was out of line. I don't know what's gotten into him." I leaned against the wall. "Hasn't he always been like that?" She bit her lip. He can be harsh, but not like that." "I swear, Hannah, I didn't know he'd say those things." "You told him I was medically discharged?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. "Of course I did. I wasn't going to lie about it." "And you told him about the nightmares, the panic attacks?" She hesitated. "I told my mom. She probably told him. They ask a lot of questions. They're my parents." I looked at her. "Did you tell them everything? Or just enough to make me seem broken?" Her eyes widened. "How can you even ask that?" "Because he sat there and called me a failed soldier, and you just froze." "I was in shock," she protested. "I yelled at him. You heard me. And then you let him keep going. You let him say I'm gaming the system, that I took a payout, that I tapped out." Tears spilled over. What was I supposed to do? Scream? Flip the table? That would have helped. It would have helped me. I shot back. "Just once, I wanted you to choose me over him." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I pressed. When he called me that, did any part of you agree with him, even a little? Silence. That was all the answer I needed. She looked away. I worry about you, she whispered. You're so strong, but you're also fragile sometimes. You shut down. You have bad days. When Dad said failed, I thought about all the times you've told me you feel like one. I didn't agree with him, but I recognized it. I stared at her. There's a difference between me calling myself a failure in a private, vulnerable moment and your father using it as a weapon in public. I know, she said quickly. I know. I'm just trying to explain. He thinks he's protecting me. He thinks you're unstable. So he insults me until I prove him right, I said. Great strategy. She reached for my hand. Please don't let him ruin this. We're engaged. We're starting our life together. Don't give him this power. I pulled my hand back. For the first time since I'd met her, I really looked at her as part of them, not separate. Same hesitant defense of him, same excuse making. If we get married, I said slowly, he'll always be there. At holidays, calling the shots financially, making those comments. Is that what you want? She swallowed. We can set boundaries. Will you? I asked. Because what just happened in there, if that's the before we're legally tied to you version, I'm terrified of the after. She went very still. Are you breaking up with me over my father being an ass at dinner? The thought punched me in the chest. No, I loved her. I loved her more than I'd admitted to myself. But love doesn't erase red flags. It just wraps them in prettier packaging. No, I said, softer. I'm not, but I need space. I can't go back in there and pretend everything's fine. Her jaw clenched. So what? You're going to walk out? Make a scene? Prove him right that you can't handle a difficult situation? That hurt because it came out too easily. Like maybe she'd had that thought before and pushed it down. I stepped back. Wow, I said quietly. Okay. Instant regret flashed in her eyes. Hannah, I didn't mean... Yeah, I cut in. You did. We stood there, breathing hard, staring at each other. Finally, she said, just... Please don't do anything you can't take back. I'll handle him. I promise. Just go home. I'll come by tomorrow. I didn't promise anything. I just slipped past her, washed my face, and walked out of that restaurant without looking back at the private room. As I passed the kitchen, Miguel stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron. Ma'am, he said, voice low. Sorry if I made it worse in there. I stopped. You didn't make it worse. You just put a spotlight on what was already there. He nodded, eyes searching my face. Guy's a jerk. I huffed a humorless laugh. You have no idea. If you ever need anything, he said, surprising me, like, I don't know, someone to back up your story, to talk about what you did over there, I owe you, big time. The strange thing was, as much as I appreciated his words, they also twisted something in my gut. I hated the idea that my worth needed to be validated by someone else's testimony, but I could see in his face that he needed to say it as much for himself as for me. Thank you, Alvarez, I said. And it's Hannah now, or at least ma'am when my leg's not hurting. He smiled. Yes, ma'am. I walked out into the cool night air and stood on the sidewalk, inhaling exhaust fumes like they were oxygen. Cars whooshed by. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Please text me when you get home. I shoved my phone in my bag and started walking to my car. If the story had ended there, with a horrible dinner, a jerk future father-in-law, and a brave waiter, it would have just been another war story I told my therapist. But that dinner was just the first crack in the facade. I didn't know it then, but Richard Hayes had already decided I was a problem to be solved, and he wasn't the type to let problems walk away. The real betrayal started the following week. At that point in my life, I was juggling a lot. Full-time nursing school, part-time work at a clinic, physical therapy twice a week, therapy once a week. I was tired all the time. My memory, which used to be sharp as a knife, sometimes fuzzed around the edges. So when weird little things started happening, I wrote them off as me being stressed. The first was an email. Dear Ms. Parker, thank you for your interest in Valor Front Solutions. After careful consideration, we have decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, HR Department, Valor Front Solutions. I stared at it, confused. I hadn't applied to Valor Front Solutions. I barely knew what it was, beyond hearing Emily mention it as one of the companies her dad did business with. I scrolled down. Attached to the rejection email was my application, a cover letter, my resume, and a questionnaire, all with my name, all written in language that kind of sounded like me, but off, like someone had fed my LinkedIn into a blender. Dear hiring manager, As a former Army captain, I struggle with the transition to civilian life, but I am eager to find any role I can in your company. Struggle with the transition. Any role I can. I would never write that. It made me sound desperate, broken. I put my head in my hands. Was this some kind of scam? A prank? I forwarded the email to Emily with a question mark. She replied 5 minutes later. Oh my God, my dad said he'd keep an eye out for opportunities for you. He must have submitted your info to one of his partners. Let me call him. My skin prickled. He'd applied for a job for me without my permission, using some weird cover letter that made me sound like a charity case. An hour later, she called. Okay, she said, in that careful tone she used when she was trying not to upset me. So, Dad says he did send your resume to a few places. He was trying to help. Without telling me? I asked. He thought it would be a nice surprise. She rushed on. He did use AI for the cover letters, which, yeah, maybe wasn't the best call, but his heart was in the right place. His heart called me a failed soldier, I snapped. Now it's writing bad essays about how pathetic I am. She sighed. Hannah, come on. He's old school. He doesn't get that you might see that as insulting. To him, it's like pulling strings for someone you care about. I don't want his strings, I said. I want him to leave me alone. There was a pause. Then she said carefully, he also mentioned that maybe nursing isn't the best fit, that with your challenges, a high-stress job could be dangerous for you and for patients. My stomach turned. He said that? He's just worried. Is that you or him? I interrupted. Because you've never said it like that before? She hesitated. I've thought it sometimes, when you get that faraway look during a siren. But I also know how good you are with people, how calm you are in a crisis. I believe in you, I do. Then tell him to stay out of it, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't ask for his help. I don't want it. We hung up on a tense note. A knot settled in my chest and stayed there. Over the next few weeks, more strange things happened. The clinic where I worked put me on leave to review some concerns. When I asked what concerns, my supervisor, who usually loved me, fumbled and finally said, we got an anonymous call saying you'd had a breakdown at your last job, that you'd left the Army under difficult circumstances. We just have to be careful when it comes to patient safety, Hannah. You understand. I went cold. That's not true, I said. None of that is true. She gave me that pitying look I'd seen 100 times in group therapy. I'm on your side. I just have protocols to follow. 4 days after that, my landlord, who'd always been relaxed about everything, slipped a notice under my door. He was selling the building. Month-to-month leases like mine would probably not be renewed. He recommended I look into alternatives soon. Then my VA disability check, which had never been late, suddenly got held for review due to a flagged discrepancy. When I went to the office, I found out someone had submitted a tip to their fraud hotline that I was exaggerating my injuries. The woman at the desk wouldn't say who. It's anonymous, she said. We just have to look into it. By that point, even with my battered brain, I could put pieces together. I called Emily. Your dad is trying to ruin my life, I said, skipping any soft opening. She groaned. Hannah, no. He would never. My clinic got an anonymous call. The VA got an anonymous tip. My landlord, who's been friends with your dad for years, suddenly wants me out. You tell me how that's a coincidence. She was quiet for a long time. I'll talk to him, she said finally. I promise. If he's overstepping, I'll shut it down. That was the first time she used the word overstepping instead of trying to help. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. 3 days later, she showed up at my apartment with red-rimmed eyes and a bottle of wine. He denies it, she said without preamble. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course he does. He swears he only ever made a few calls to help you, not hurt you. She wrung her hands. He did call the clinic, but to recommend you. He says he never said anything about you being unstable. And the VA? I asked. Did he recommend me there too? He said he would never mess with that, she said. That he respects your service too much. Respect, I repeated, tasting the word, like calling me a failed soldier at dinner. She flinched. He regrets that. Did he say those words? I asked. She looked down. He said, maybe I was a bit harsh. That's as close as he gets. I sank onto the couch. He's trying to push me out of your life, I said. Saying it out loud made it solid, real. He wants you to break up with me. He thinks if he makes my life unstable enough, I'll look like a bad bet. She sat next to me. He can't make me do anything. Can't he? I asked quietly. She took my hand. I love you. I chose you, not him. If I have to choose again, I will. I searched her face. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Okay, I said. Then I need you to do something for me. Anything. Don't tell him anything else about me. No more details, no more updates, no more sharing my therapy stuff or my nightmares. He can't use what he doesn't have. She hesitated. He's my dad. He'll notice if I stop talking about you. Then lie, I said. You lied to your RA about me when we were sneaking into your dorm. You can lie to him. She gave a small, reluctant smile. I was very good at that. Use your powers for good now, I said. She nodded. Okay, I'll try. Not try, I said. Do. In that moment, I thought I was drawing a clear line. I thought maybe this was the turning point where she would finally, fully, choose me over her father. Instead, it became the line she'd spend the next few months dancing on until the ground under both of us cracked. A week later, she asked me to come to a charity gala. It's for Valor Front, she said, watching my face. Dad's company. They're raising money for veteran housing. I know you hate these things, but it would mean a lot if you came. Their whole brand is about supporting people like you. It could, I don't know, soften him or give him another opportunity to humiliate me, I said. I'll be right there with you, she promised. I won't let him start anything. Against my better judgment, I agreed, partly because I was tired of being on defense, partly because some stupid, hopeful part of me thought, maybe if he sees me in that room, surrounded by other veterans, he'll see I'm not just some broken girl his daughter dragged home. The gala was at a downtown hotel ballroom, all white linens and uplighting and gold-rimmed plates, men in tuxes, women in cocktail dresses, a slideshow of wounded veterans on giant screens set to inspirational music. Walking in, I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. The decorations were red, white, and blue, but the whole thing felt off, like they were using people like me as a theme. Relax, Emily whispered, looping her arm through mine. You look incredible. I borrowed a dress from my friend Jasmine. Black, simple, with sleeves that hid my scars. My hair was up, my hands were steady. On the outside, I looked like any other guest. On the inside, my heart was doing that jittery thing it did in convoys. We found a table near the front. Richard was already there, holding court. The moment he saw me, his smile flattened. Hannah, he said, didn't expect to see you here. Dad, Emily warned. This is your event, I said evenly. Why wouldn't I be here? He shrugged. I just assumed noisy rooms might be difficult for you. I stared at him. I'll manage. He smirked. Brave girl. I took my seat, imagining 1,000 ways to throw my water in his face. A few minutes later, a woman in a red dress slipped into the empty seat next to me. Mid-30s, sharp bob, sharp eyes, name tag that read Tara Willis, CFO, Valor Front Solutions. Hi, she said cheerfully. You must be Hannah. I've heard so much about you. I tensed. From who? She arched an eyebrow, amused. Relax. Emily never shuts up about you. She nodded toward the stage. And our fearless leader mentions you more than he realizes, I think. I followed her gaze. Richard was talking to a senator now, gesturing toward the slideshow, like he personally knew every kid in it. What does he say? I asked carefully. That you're a case study, she said, using air quotes. A reminder of why we do what we do. He thinks he's being flattering. A case study, I repeated, something cold trickling down my spine. He likes examples, she went on. Stats, stories, people he can point to when he pitches contracts or donations. You're compelling. I felt slightly ill. I didn't agree to be his poster child. She gave me a sideways look. You don't say. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Richard stepped up to the podium, applause drifting up around him like smoke. Friends, he boomed, patriots, tonight we gather, not just to drink good wine and write checks, though we certainly won't complain about either, but to honor a promise. The promise we make to every man and woman who puts on this uniform and says, I'm willing to put my life on the line for my country. The crowd murmured approvingly. I stared at the big Valor Front logo on the screen behind him, a stylized eagle holding a folded American flag. He went on about sacrifice, about duty, about our brave boys and girls who come home with visible and invisible wounds. His voice grew thick when he talked about suicides. People dabbed their eyes. I should have felt moved. Instead, I felt greasy, like I needed a shower. And that's why, he said, companies like Valor Front exist to bridge the gap, to take the generosity of people like you and turn it into real change. Slides clicked by. Shiny apartment buildings, happy veterans shaking hands, check presentations. I leaned toward Tara. Do they really live in places like that? I whispered. She hesitated. Some do. That wasn't a yes, I said. She gave a tight smile. You ask a lot of questions for someone who's just here as a guest. Maybe I'll apply for a job, I said, half joking. If your HR ever forgives me for that AI cover letter. Her eyes sharpened. We never got your application. I saw the rejection email. I know what I see in my system, she said, tone suddenly chilly. And your name's not in it. I filed that away under things that don't add up. Later, after the speeches and the rubber chicken and the silent auction, they did the part that made my stomach really turn. The featured veteran. And now, Richard announced, I'd like you to meet someone very special, someone who represents both the need and the hope we see every day. My entire body went cold. Please welcome, he said, Sergeant Michael Carter. I exhaled. Not me. I hated that I'd even tensed. A man in a wheelchair rolled up onto the stage. He was maybe 30, legs gone from mid-thigh, sleeves rolled to show tattooed forearms. He looked uncomfortable as hell. I met Michael 3 years ago, Richard said. He'd just been discharged. He was living in his truck. No job, no prospects, lost in the system. Michael stared at the microphone like he wanted it to catch fire. With support from Valor Front and generous donors like you, Richard went on, Michael now lives in a fully accessible apartment. He has a job, a future. The crowd applauded. Michael's jaw clenched. Michael, Richard said, clapping him on the shoulder. Tell them what this has meant to you. Michael cleared his throat. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the help. His voice was flat. His eyes flicked to the side of the stage, to a woman I assumed was his wife. Her expression was tight. As he talked, in short, halting sentences, I saw something that made my blood freeze. In the slide behind him, an image of the fully accessible apartment, I recognized the building, not from some glossy brochure, but from a VA forum thread titled, Don't Live Here If You Value Your Sanity. Mold, broken elevators, no security, tenants complaining about leaks, a long thread of angry comments about Valor Front never fixing anything. The room blurred. I blinked hard. I leaned toward Tara again. Is that the actual building he lives in? I asked. She hesitated. It's one of our properties. I've seen that place, I said. Online. Veterans complaining they have mushrooms growing in their bathrooms and no one answering calls. Her jaw tightened. We have a maintenance backlog. That's not what it looked like when I saw it, I said. It looked like a slum with a flag on the front. Her eyes flashed. We house hundreds of vets who would otherwise be on the street. Is it perfect? No. Are we working on it? Yes. If you'd like to volunteer to fix our plumbing with your own 2 hands, be my guest. Her defensiveness told me more than her words. Emily noticed my face. Hey, she whispered. You okay? Did you know about this? I asked. About what? That your dad is making money off crumbling buildings while telling these people he's saving them. She frowned. He's not making money off them. The whole point is to help. Companies don't do anything unless there's money involved, I said. This isn't a charity. It's a business. What are you saying? She asked slowly. I'm saying something feels wrong, I said, and I can't unfeel it. That night, lying awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept seeing 2 images overlaid, Miguel standing at attention, and that decaying apartment building with an American flag fluttering out front. Richard had power, money, influence. He was very comfortable using my type of story to raise those things, and he'd made it clear he saw me as weak, broken, and in his daughter's way. If he was willing to quietly call my clinic my landlord, the VA, what else was he willing to do? That's when the idea of revenge stopped being a vague, angry fantasy and started to take shape as something sharp and cold and real. At first, I just wanted to protect myself. I started documenting everything, every weird email, every withdrawn opportunity, every conversation with my supervisor or VA rep that mentioned anonymous concerns. I wrote down dates and times, I screenshotted voicemails, and saved them to a folder named recipes so no one would casually click it. I requested my VA file. It took weeks, but when it arrived, thick and stapled and full of acronyms, I read every page. In the notes from the fraud review, I found a summary of the anonymous tip. Subject is believed to be overstating functional limitations, seen at local gym lifting weights, reported to be pursuing physically demanding degree, possible malingering. There was a line that made my stomach turn. Caller identified as concerned family friend with knowledge of subject's mental health status. Family friend. Who else knew the details of my therapy sessions, my medication, my worst nights? I confronted Emily. We sat at my kitchen table, paper file between us like a third person. Did you tell your parents about my disability rating? I asked. The percentage, the diagnoses. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. I might have mentioned it. I don't remember the exact numbers, but did you repeat anything my therapist said about my triggers, my coping mechanisms? She flushed. My mom asked how you were doing. I told her you were making progress. I might have shared a few. So yes, I said, you told her, and she told him, and he called the VA and painted me as some sort of scammer. You don't know that it was him, she said quickly. Who else would describe himself as a concerned family friend? I snapped. My mailman? She stood up, pacing. He wouldn't do something that could actually hurt your benefits. He knows you need that. He also knows if I lose my stability, I look more like the broken girl he keeps telling you I am, I said. He's not trying to kill me. He's trying to make me leave. Her face crumpled. He said he just wanted me to think about the future, that maybe marrying someone with issues would be hard. Everyone has issues, I said. His are just more expensive. She didn't laugh. I took a deep breath. I can handle your dad hating me. I can handle rich people looking down on me. I've been looked down on my whole life, but I can't handle you feeding him ammunition to shoot at me. Tears spilled over. I didn't know he would use it like that. You kept telling me he respects my service, I said. This is what his respect looks like, sabotaging my benefits, calling me a fraud behind my back, using veterans in his company brochures while their apartments mold. She choked out. What do you want me to do, Hannah? Cut him off? Walk away from my family? From my job? You've already asked me to accept his abuse to keep things peaceful, I said. Now you're asking me to accept him actively dismantling my life. At what point do I get to say no? She covered her face with her hands. I can talk to him again. Make him stop. Make him back off. He doesn't respect you enough to listen, I said quietly. He sees you as an extension of himself. If he can't control me through you, he'll find another way. She dropped her hands. So what? We're done? I looked at her, at the woman I loved, at the woman who'd held my hand through panic attacks and slept on the couch with me when my nightmares were bad, at the woman who'd, maybe without fully realizing it, handed my secrets to the one person who could hurt me most. I don't want us to be done, I said, but I can't marry into a family where the patriarch sees me as a project or an enemy, and I can't be with someone who doesn't see how dangerous that is. She stared at me, eyes wide and wet. Please don't make me choose. That's the thing, I said softly. You already did. You just didn't say it out loud. That night, she slept in my bed, but we may as well have been in different rooms. In the morning, she left early for meetings. She kissed my forehead like I was a sick child. 2 days later, my friend Jasmine sent me a screenshot. Babe, you should see this, she wrote. It was from one of Emily's college friends' Instagram stories, a boomerang of them clinking mimosa glasses at brunch. Overlaid text, talking E out of marrying the charity case soldier girl. Charity case soldier girl. One of the tagged accounts was Emily's. She hadn't posted it, but she'd been there. She'd smiled in the video. She'd let the caption stand. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I forwarded it to Emily. No text, just the image. She replied almost instantly. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I told her to take that down. She was being dramatic. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I typed back, my vision blurring. Her response came in a flurry. I was venting, I was upset, I said things I didn't mean. You said I was a charity case, I wrote. That's exactly what your dad thinks. Guess I know where you get it from. She called. I let it ring. She called again. I turned my phone off. That was the day any lingering hope I had that she was fully on my side died. Grief is a weird thing. It doesn't always come with tears and dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes it comes as this cold clarity. If they were going to paint me as a broken, helpless victim, I was going to show them just how wrong that picture was. I didn't throw plates. I didn't slash tires. I didn't send angry texts at 3 a.m. I made a plan. First, I needed information. I knew in my gut that Richard wasn't just a manipulative father. He was a hypocrite, maybe worse. I started with the veterans. Through a Facebook group for local vets, I put out a casual post. Anyone here ever dealt with Valor Front housing? Looking for real experiences, good or bad? My inbox exploded. Holes in my ceiling for 6 months. Elevator's been broken since January. I have to drag myself up 3 flights on my hands. They lost my paperwork and gave my room to someone else, even though I'd already moved out of the shelter. Rent went up after 6 months, even though they said it wouldn't. I asked if anyone would be willing to talk to me on the record. Most were scared. They'll kick me out, one woman said. Then where will I go? But one guy, a former Marine named Darnell, agreed to meet at a coffee shop. He rolled up in his beat-up sedan wearing an old hoodie and a USMC cap. His hands shook a little when he lifted his cup. "You're brave," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Taking on Hayes." "I'm just asking questions," I said. "For now." He snorted. That's where it always starts. He told me his story. Valor Front had given him a place after he'd been on the street for a year. At first, he'd been grateful. Anything was better than the tent under the overpass. Then the problem started. Leaks, broken locks, a neighbor dealing drugs out of his unit, complaints ignored. When he threatened to call the local news, his case manager reminded him that his lease could be terminated any time for cause. "They say they're a charity," he said, "but they bill the government top dollar. They get contracts to manage these places, and they cut corners every chance they get." "Do you have paperwork?" I asked. "Emails? Photos?" He smirked. "You military types, always thinking like investigators." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were printed emails, maintenance requests, and pictures on cheap paper. Black mold, rats, graffiti, broken windows. "Why me?" I asked. "Why trust me with this?" "You're not scared of him," he said simply. "Most people are. He's got judges and politicians on speed dial." But you looked him in the eye at that gala, and he flinched. "What makes you think I'm not scared?" I asked. "Because you showed up," he said. "Scared people hide." He wasn't entirely right. I was scared. But fear is different when you've already faced worse. Once you've had mortars land near your bed, a rich man's legal threats lose some of their sting. I gathered more stories. I talked to tenants, to former employees, to a maintenance guy who'd quit after being told to paint over mold instead of fixing the leak. The picture that emerged was ugly. Valor Front wasn't technically breaking the law most of the time. They were exploiting every loophole, charging high management fees to nonprofits that subcontracted to them, minimizing maintenance, maximizing profit, using veterans' faces in their brochures while treating them like numbers on a spreadsheet. And at the center of it all was Richard Hayes, smiling, shaking hands, giving speeches about sacrifice. Information is power, but raw information is messy. I needed help shaping it into something sharp. Enter Tara, the CFO. She came to me, actually. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Hannah Parker?" a crisp voice asked when I answered. "Depends who's asking," I said. "It's Tara. We met at the gala. I'm the one who yelled at you about plumbing." I sat up. "What can I do for you, Ms. Willis?" "I'd like to buy you a coffee," she said. "Somewhere very, very far from my office." We met at a park bench near the river, both of us in sunglasses like we were in some low-budget spy movie. "You were right," she said without preamble. "About the building, about a lot of things, probably." "You're the CFO," I said. "Wouldn't you know?" "That's the thing," she said. "I do know. I know exactly how the money flows. I know how much we charge the government to manage those properties. I know how much we actually spend on them. I know the gap between those numbers." "Then why are we just talking now?" I asked. She blew out a breath. "Because talking gets you fired. Or worse. And until recently, I liked my job. Until recently, I prodded. Until my boss started using phrases like failed soldier about someone whose file he'd had me pull. My spine straightened. "He had you pull my file?" She nodded. "After your little scene at dinner?" "Little scene," I repeated. "You mean when he called me a failure and a waiter stood up for me?" "Yeah, that," she said. "He called me the next day and asked for everything we could find on you. Service record, discharge status, disability rating, anything that could be public or less public." My stomach turned. "Why?" "He said he wanted to make sure you weren't a liability," she said. "For the company, for his daughter. He used words like due diligence and background check, but the way he talked," she shook her head. "It was like he was hunting." I clenched my jaw. "What did you find?" "Mostly what you'd expect," she said. "Honorable discharge, commendations, some mental health stuff I had no business seeing." She looked ashamed. "I told him we had no right to dig into that without your consent. He told me to do my job." "He's thorough," I said bitterly. "I'll give him that." She leaned in. "He's also sloppy when he thinks he's untouchable." I raised an eyebrow. "Explain." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "He's been moving money. Not just legally immoral, but actually illegal moving. His personal foundation that's supposed to give grants to veterans orgs, half of it is a slush fund. He uses it to pay for consulting fees to shell companies he owns. It's money laundering in a suit and tie. Anger flared, but under it was something colder, opportunity. Why are you telling me this? I asked. I'm just a case study, remember? Because you're not scared of him, she said, and because I am, and because if anyone can blow this up, it's someone he's already underestimated. I studied her. What's in it for you? Self-preservation, she said bluntly. If he goes down, I don't want to go with him. If I help you, maybe I get a deal. Maybe I sleep at night. Help me how? She slid a flash drive across the bench between us. Internal memos, accounting spreadsheets, donation records that don't match our tax filings, board meeting minutes where he literally says, no one cares if veterans live with a bit of mold as long as the photo op looks good. My stomach lurched. He actually said that? More than once, she said quietly. I have 12 years of his arrogance in PowerPoint form. I stared at the flash drive. It looked so small, so innocent. What do you expect me to do with this? I asked. Whatever you want, she said. Go to the press, the feds, blast it on Twitter. I don't care. Just don't tell him it came from me. Not yet. I picked up the drive. It was warm from the sun, or maybe from her hand, or maybe from the sheer amount of ick inside it. I'll need proof for anything I say, I said. I can't just accuse a man like that without backup. You'll have more than you know what to do with, she said. Just be careful. He protects his reputation viciously. I slipped the drive into my pocket. I'm not scared of his lawyers, I said. You should be scared of his reach, she replied. He has friends in high places, judges, politicians, the VA regional director. She gave me a meaningful look. You think your benefit review was random? I felt sick. I'm saying he called in favors, she said. He tests people, sees how far they'll go for him, if they'll bend rules for a patriotic cause. He wraps everything in the flag. It makes people blind. Not everyone, I said. Not anymore. When I got home, I plugged the flash drive into my old laptop. Folders bloomed across the screen, labeled in dry corporate language. Q4 financials, vendor contracts, JVH Foundation grants. I clicked and clicked. The numbers made my head spin, but patterns emerged. Donations in, only a fraction out. Consulting fees to LLCs with no websites. Contracts with shell nonprofits that shared mailing addresses with Richard's other companies. It was like watching a magician do a trick in slow motion. You could see where the hand went, where the ball actually was. The more I saw, the less this felt like just personal revenge. This was bigger than a nasty father-in-law. This was a man using the image of people like me, of Miguel, of Darnell, of Michael on the stage to line his own pockets. Anger, when it's that big, can consume you, or it can focus you. I chose focus. Step 1, protect myself legally. I found a lawyer through a veterans legal aid clinic. Her name was Karen Caldwell. She wore cardigans and sensible shoes, and she had the deadliest calm I'd ever seen outside of a combat zone. You did the right thing coming in, she said after I dumped my whole story on her desk, flash drive included. But you've been way too nice about all this. Nice? I repeated incredulous. You should have cut off contact with that man the moment he interfered with your VA benefits, she said. What he did could be considered harassment, maybe even fraud, depending on what he told them. Can we prove it? I asked. She smiled slightly. That's my favorite question. We filed complaints with the VA, disputing the anonymous tip and requesting an investigation into interference, with the state medical board, noting the clinic's reliance on unverified rumors to suspend me, with the housing authority, flagging my landlord's suspicious timing and connections. We sent a carefully worded letter to Richard's office, laying out the pattern and making it clear that further interference would lead to legal action. Won't that just piss him off? I asked. Oh, absolutely, she said. But right now, he thinks you're an easy target, a scared little vet with no resources. He needs to know you're not alone. Step 2, build a case against him. I made copies of everything on that flash drive, one for me, one for Karen, one hidden in a box of old uniforms at my parents' house in Ohio, another uploaded to a cloud account under a burner email. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition in overdrive. We looped in a federal investigator from the VA's Office of Inspector General. His name was Reynolds, and he had the exhausted look of a man who'd seen too many patriots steal too much money. On the face of it, he said, flipping through the summaries Karen had prepared, this is interesting. Interesting good or interesting I'll throw it on the pile? I asked. Interesting, like, if half of this checks out, your boyfriend's dad is in a world of trouble, he said. Fiancé, I corrected automatically, then quieter. For now, anyway. He glanced at me. You okay, Captain? I'm not a captain anymore, I said. Just Hannah. He nodded. Revenge is tricky, Hannah. It feels good in the movies. In real life, it can eat you alive. This isn't about revenge, I lied. Not only, it's about stopping him from hurting more people. Those things can coexist, he said. Just remember which one you want more. I thought about that a lot in the weeks that followed. Step 3, expose him publicly. Legal cases take time. Investigations move at the speed of paperwork. I knew if I sat around waiting for the FBI to swoop in, I'd go crazy. So I went to a journalist. Not some random blogger, but a reporter for a major paper who'd done a series on VA hospital wait times. I'd saved her articles years ago, thinking, this one gets it. Her name was Lena. She had weary eyes and a notebook she never stopped scribbling in. Off the record at first, I said when we met at a cafe, I just want to see if this is even a thing you'd be interested in. By the time I finished telling her about Valor Front, the slum buildings, the Shell charities, the gala speeches, and the flash drive, her coffee was cold. It's a thing, she said. It's definitely a thing. And the conflict of interest? I asked. With the VA people on his speed dial, with the politicians who show up to his events. She smiled grimly. That's called a story. We worked out protections, anonymizing some sources, giving the DOJ and OIG time to do preliminary checks before anything went to print so we couldn't be accused of smearing a good man with flimsy rumors. All through this, my personal life was falling apart. Emily and I barely saw each other. When we did, it was tense. She was caught between her father and me, and instead of choosing a side, she tried to stand in the middle until it tore her in half. One night, she came over with a folder. I want you to sign a prenup, she said, hands trembling. I stared at her. Wow, romance isn't dead. It's not like that, she rushed. My parents' lawyer drew it up months ago. Before all this, it's standard. Standard for what? I asked. For rich families who think poor people are gold diggers? She winced. It just says that if we divorce, you won't have claim to certain family assets. The houses, the company shares. It's protection. For them, I said. For everyone, she insisted. It means my dad can stop worrying you're after his money. I've never asked him for a dime, I said. I've never asked you for a dime. I know that, she said softly. But he doesn't, and he never will. This way you can prove you're not. I thumbed through the document. It was thick, dense, full of clauses about trusts and non-disclosure and waiving rights. Why is there a section about derogatory public statements? I asked. It says I can't say anything that damages the reputation of you or your family, ever, even if it's true. That's boilerplate, she said weakly. It's a gag order, I said, disguised as a wedding present. She sat down hard. I don't want to lose you, she whispered, but I also don't want to lose them. This is how they're offering peace. Peace, I repeated, on their terms, where I stay quiet about what your dad does with veterans as long as I get to sit at Thanksgiving. Her eyes filled. It's not that stark. Yes, I said. It is. I set the prenup down carefully. I'm not signing this, I said. And I'm not marrying into a family that would even ask me to. Hannah, she choked. I loved you, I said. The past tense slipped out before I could stop it. It hung in the air between us. I still do some days, but I can't. I can't keep bleeding for someone who hands the knife to the person cutting me. She sobbed. Please, don't do this. I didn't do this, I said. Your father did. And you let him. There's no neat cinematic way to end a 3-year relationship. There was no yelling, no throwing of rings. Just 2 women sitting on a cheap couch, crying into their hands, while the ink on a prenup glared up at them from the coffee table. When she left, she didn't take the ring. She set it on the table with a small click. Call me if you change your mind, she whispered. I won't, I said. It felt like ripping something out of my chest. After that, I didn't see her for months. Those months were brutal, not going to lie. Revenge might give you a sense of purpose, but it doesn't tuck you in at night. I missed her laugh, her warmth, her stupid star leggings. But every time I thought about calling, I pictured that Instagram caption, the prenup, Her silence at that dinner table. I went to physical therapy. I went to therapy. I went to meetings with Karen and Agent Reynolds and Lena. I went to Darnell's building and helped him take pictures of the new leak in his ceiling. And slowly, like a train gathering speed, the system started to move. The VA closed the fraud review in my favor and opened a separate inquiry into the source of the tip. My clinic quietly invited me back to work with a mumbled apology about miscommunication. My landlord's sale fell through. A letter from Karen citing potential fair housing violations might have had something to do with that. Valor Front got a request from the OIG for documents related to their housing contracts, and Emily's dad started to sweat. I know this not because I was talking to him, but because people in his orbit were. Tara sent me a late-night text. He knows something's up, yelled at legal for an hour, asked if anyone's been talking out of school. Lena emailed. He declined an interview, sent a carefully worded statement about how Valor Front takes very seriously our duty to veterans and compliance with all laws. Classic. Agent Reynolds called. We're executing some subpoenas next week. He'll know by then he's under federal investigation. You should expect pushback. Pushback came in the form of a thin, expensive-looking man who showed up at my door with a folder. Ms. Parker, he said, I'm Daniel Ivey, counsel for Mr. Richard Hayes. My stomach clenched. Do you have a warrant or just nerve? I asked. He smiled tightly. Just a request for a civil, off-the-record conversation. He handed me a letter. It was 3 pages of legalese, but the gist was clear. They knew I'd been talking. They considered my statements and actions defamatory. They urged me to refrain from making unverified or misleading allegations. There was a not-so-subtle hint that if I didn't, they'd see me in court. Karen's response was laughter. I'll draft our reply, she said, and for the love of God, do not talk to this man without me present. We didn't just reply. We countered. We mentioned the VA inquiry, the OIG subpoenas, the potential IRS interest in the JVH Foundation's 990 forms. They backed off, for the moment. But I knew men like Richard. When direct pressure didn't work, they went sideways. The sideways attempt came 2 weeks later in the form of a text from Emily. Please, can we talk? It's important. I stared at it for a long time. Then, against Karen's advice and my better judgment, I agreed to meet. Not at my place, not at hers. At a park bench, out in the open. She looked thinner, older. There were shadows under her eyes. Hi, she said, like we'd just seen each other yesterday. Hi, I replied. I heard you've been busy, she said, attempting a wry smile. I could say the same, I said. You got a promotion. She blinked. How did you know? LinkedIn, I said. Congratulations on becoming VP of Brand at Valor Front. She flinched. It wasn't. Spare me the I didn't ask for it, I said. He's grooming you to take over his empire. She sat. He's terrified, she said quietly. He knows the feds are sniffing around. He won't say it, but I see it. The way his hand shakes when he pours his whiskey. Good, I said. No sympathy. She looked at me. He thinks you're the one behind it. He's right, I said. Partly. She exhaled. He wants you to stop. I'm sure he does. He asked me to talk to you, she said, to see if there was any compromise we could find. I laughed. He sends his daughter to do his dirty work. Of course he does. Her eyes flashed. This isn't dirty work. Trying to convince the person he's been sabotaging to let him keep stealing from veterans, I said. Sounds pretty dirty. She twisted her hands in her lap. He says he'll make things right, fix the buildings, tighten up the books, step back from the foundation. He just doesn't want his name dragged through the mud. He doesn't want consequences, I said. He wants a PR-friendly slap on the wrist. He's my father, she whispered. I know he's done terrible things, but he paid for my college. He was there when I broke my arm in 5th grade. He cried at my high school graduation. People aren't just monsters or saints. I know that, I said. Believe me, I know. I've seen good men do bad things in bad places. I've done things I'm not proud of. But at some point, you either keep doing harm or you stop. And from where I'm sitting, he hasn't stopped. He doubled down. She looked at me, tears welling. Do you ever feel bad about what you're doing to him? For a moment, I saw us as we'd been, at my kitchen table laughing over takeout, on my couch, her head on my shoulder during thunderstorms, in bed, her tracing the scars on my leg and whispering that she loved every part of me. Yes, I said honestly. Sometimes I do. Revenge isn't clean, it's messy. It hurts people who weren't the target. It keeps me up at night. Then why keep going? She asked, voice cracking. Because feeling bad about doing the right thing is still better than feeling helpless while the wrong thing wins, I said. Because it's not just about him calling me a name at dinner. It's about all the Miguels and Darnells and Michaels he's used as props while living in houses 10 times better than anything they'll see. It's about you, too. Me? She whispered. He's been controlling you your whole life, I said. Through money, through guilt, through fear. You think you're choosing for yourself, but you're not. You couldn't even tell him no when he asked you to hand me that prenup. She wiped her cheeks. What do you want from me, Hannah? She asked. A confession, an apology, blood. I want you to tell the truth, I said. To yourself first, and then maybe to someone who can do something with it. You mean testify against my own father, she said. Destroy his life. He's destroying his own life, I said. You'd just be turning on the light. She stared at her hands. If I do that, I lose everything. My job, my inheritance, my family. You keep your soul, I said quietly. She flinched. We sat there, the sounds of kids playing in the distance. Finally, she stood. I can't, she said. I'm not as strong as you think I am. Then you and I are done, I said. For good. She nodded, biting her lips so hard it turned white. I figured. She walked away, shoulders hunched. I watched her go, heart aching and oddly lighter. A chapter closing, painful but necessary. The real turning point came not from Emily, but from karma, or fate, or just timing. Lena's article dropped on a Tuesday, front page, above the fold. Patriot or profiteer, inside Valor Front's troubled veteran housing empire. There was a picture of Richard, smiling at a ribbon cutting, scissors in hand. Next to it, a picture of a Valor Front building with boarded up windows. The article was brutal, detailed, sourced. It laid out the flow of money, the poor conditions, the shell companies, the quotes from Darnell, from Michael, from other vets who'd finally agreed to speak. My name was in it. The DOJ announced a formal investigation that same week. The IRS got involved. The VA OIG expanded their probe. Valor Front's stock, yes, they'd gone public 2 years earlier, took a hit. Sponsors pulled out of their next gala. A senator returned a campaign donation with a curt statement about serious concerns. It was intoxicating. Watching a man who'd seemed untouchable suddenly realize the ground under him wasn't as solid as he thought. But revenge isn't a straight line. It's more like a spiral. He hit back. A smear piece appeared on a conservative blog a few days later. Disgruntled veteran behind attack on patriotic CEO, the headline screamed. They didn't use my full name, but they used enough. A former captain discharged for mental health issues. Accused of over-dramatizing her service. Seen living a comfortable lifestyle on disability checks while complaining about minor apartment problems. They painted me exactly how he saw me, a weak, unstable woman biting the hand that fed her. The comments were brutal. Typical, they're never grateful. Probably made up half her story. She should be ashamed discrediting a man who's done so much for vets. Miguel texted me a screenshot with one line. Ignore these clowns. We know the truth. Still, it stung. Old shame resurfaced, old doubts. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was making a mountain out of everything, like my ex used to say when I flinched at slamming doors. Karen was firm. This is textbook retaliation, she said. We can add it to the pile. It makes him look even worse. Agent Reynolds was more blunt. Congratulations, he said. You've officially pissed off a powerful man. That means you're doing something right. Tara, meanwhile, had her own crisis. They're closing ranks, she whispered over the phone. Legal is shredding documents. Itia's upgrading the servers. which means wiping things. He's talking about moving some funds offshore. Can't you stop him? I asked. Alone? She said. No, but maybe together we can. Together how? Board meeting, she said. 2 weeks, annual strategy session. He'll be there, the whole board, the auditors, and some big donors. If there was ever a time to air this out in a room where he can't control the narrative, that's it. You want me to what, crash it? I asked. Stand up with a PowerPoint and say, "Behold, your king is naked"? She snorted. Not exactly, but you could ask questions, force the issue, make it impossible for him to bury. Why me? I said. Why not go through official whistleblower channels? Because by the time those grind through, he'll have moved half his assets and spun a new narrative, she said. And because you already blew up your life for this, might as well see it through. I'm not on the board, I reminded her. She was quiet for a beat. But you are a shareholder. I frowned. What? Emily bought you 10 shares as a Christmas present 2 years ago, she said. Remember? I did. I'd forgotten. We'd joked about me being a tiny owner of the company. I'd never thought it meant anything. It gives you the right to attend the annual meeting, Tara said. To ask questions, to vote, to make a scene, I said. To tell the truth, she countered. The idea terrified me. Standing in a boardroom full of suits, challenging a man who'd spent his life wielding influence like a weapon. I'd rather face a firefight, but I'd done that too, and survived. I thought about Miguel, saluting me in that restaurant. I thought about Emily, torn in half. I thought about every vet living in a Valor Front building with mold in their lungs. Okay, I said. I'll be there. The morning of the meeting, I almost turned around 3 times. I wore my only blazer. I printed my shareholder confirmation. I tucked a small voice recorder into my pocket, more for my own memory than anything. The Valor Front headquarters lobby was all glass and steel and tasteful art. The receptionist's eyes flicked to my name badge. Board meeting is on the 15th floor, she said. Good luck. Was that encouragement or warning? Hard to tell. Upstairs, the room was exactly what you'd expect. Long table, city views, water pitchers, too much cologne. Richard was at the head, of course. When he saw me, his face went still. Well, he said, if it isn't our resident whistleblower. Shareholder, I corrected, holding up my badge. I'm here in my official capacity. A couple of board members shifted uncomfortably. One older woman, who I recognized as a retired general, raised an eyebrow with faint interest. Mr. Hayes, the lead independent director said cautiously, Ms. Parker has a right to be here. Of course she does, he said smoothly. We welcome all input from stakeholders. His tone said otherwise. The meeting droned on, slides about growth and challenges and opportunities, carefully massaged numbers. When they got to the housing section, I raised my hand. Richard's jaw clenched. He couldn't ignore me without looking bad. Yes, Ms. Parker? I have a question about your occupancy rates, I said, keeping my voice steady. Slide 23 says 92%, but the housing authority records for your building on Marshall Street show a 60% occupancy due to health code violations. A murmur went around the table. Richard smiled thinly. We're in the process of addressing those issues. The occupancy rates reflect our overall portfolio. And the maintenance spend per unit, I asked? Your public filings show an average of $300 per unit per year. That's low, unless your tenants don't need heat, water, or walls. A couple of board members coughed into their hands. We operate efficiently, he said. We don't waste donor dollars on gold faucets or functional elevators, I said, or mold remediation or security. According to these photos, I slid printed pictures down the table. Your tenants live in conditions that would be considered unacceptable in any market, except, apparently, ours. The retired general picked one up. Her lips thinned. Is this accurate, Richard? She asked. Those are cherry-picked, he said quickly. Every large housing portfolio has outliers. We're working on it. With what money? I asked, because from what your CFO has shown me, A lot of the funds earmarked for maintenance ended up in consulting fees to companies you control. Silence. Sharper this time. He stared at me. You've seen our internal financials? The DOJ has too, I said, and the IRS, and the VA OIG. I'm just a small shareholder, but I'm a big believer in transparency. He laughed. It was a brittle sound. This is outrageous. These are baseless accusations. Tara shifted in her seat. Our eyes met briefly. She looked terrified, but she squared her shoulders. They're not baseless, she said quietly, head swiveled toward her. Tara, he said, voice sugar with acid underneath. We've talked about internal loyalty, she swallowed. We've also talked about fiduciary duty to the board, to the shareholders. She turned to the others. There are discrepancies in our books, she said carefully. I've raised concerns about them internally for over a year. They were not addressed. Ms. Parker's questions are not without merit. He stood abruptly, slamming his hand on the table. You're finished, he hissed at her. You'll never work in this town again. She flinched, but didn't back down. Maybe not, she said, but I won't be going to prison for you. The retired general spoke up, voice cool. Richard, this is serious. We need an independent audit. He forced a laugh. Of course, if that will put everyone's minds at ease. His eyes, when they met mine, were full of hate. You think you've won, he said quietly, just for me. You have no idea how this game is played. Maybe not, I said, but I know how wars are lost. One arrogant decision at a time. The board voted, right there, to commission an outside audit, to suspend some of his discretionary powers pending the outcome. It wasn't a coup, not yet, but it was the first time I'd seen him lose a vote in his own house. He stormed out, phone already at his ear, no doubt calling his lawyers, his senators, anyone who'd pick up. I walked out too, heart pounding, legs shaky. In the elevator, Tara let out a strangled laugh. Well, she said, that was something. You okay? I asked. No, she said honestly, but I feel lighter. Thank you, I said, for backing me up. Don't thank me yet, she said. We've just kicked a hornet's nest. Good, I said. Let them sting each other. The aftermath was messy. The audit found more than anyone had expected, not just sloppy bookkeeping, but outright fraud, double-billed contracts, grants never dispersed, donations rerouted. The DOJ convened a grand jury. The IRS slapped Valor Front with penalties. The VA terminated 2 of their housing contracts, citing performance deficiencies. Stockholders filed a class action lawsuit claiming they'd been misled. And Richard Hayes, war profiteer wrapped in a flag, was indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. Emily called me the day the charges were announced. You got what you wanted, she said. Her voice was flat, hollow. What I wanted, I said slowly, was for him to stop hurting people. He's going to prison, she whispered. My father, in handcuffs. He put himself there, I said. I just pointed to the camera. There was a long silence. He keeps asking about you, she said finally. In between yelling at his lawyers, he says you betrayed the family. I laughed, a harsh sound. I was never his family. You were almost, she said. I could hear the tears she was holding back. We were almost... Yeah, I said softly. We were. Do you feel better? She asked. Now that you've won? Did I? It was a fair question. I feel like something heavy isn't on my chest anymore, I said. I sleep a little easier, knowing he can't call the VA and mess with people's benefits. But this wasn't about feeling good. What was it about? She asked. Balance, I said. Karma, justice, whatever you want to call it. For every time he sat at a gala and talked about our brave men and women while cutting costs on their roofs, there needed to be a moment where he sat in a courtroom and listened to someone read his own emails back to him. Tears spilled over. I hate you, she whispered, and I'm so proud of you. My throat tightened. You don't have to pick one, I said. Maybe someday you'll just understand me. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. We didn't talk again after that. The trial was long, boring in parts, devastating in others. Miguel testified, Darnell testified, Tara testified, flipping from loyal CFO to key witness. I testified too, not about the financials, but about patterns, about the calls to my clinic, the tip to the VA, the subtle and not so subtle ways he punished me for not staying in my place. His lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a scorned ex trying to take down her would-be father-in-law. "You have a personal vendetta against my client, do you not?" he asked, voice smooth. "I have a personal history with him," I said. "But I didn't forge his signatures on those contracts. I didn't write those emails. I didn't decide to use veteran stories to raise money and then spend that money on luxury retreats. He did that all by himself." The jury took 2 days. Guilty, on most counts. The sentence wasn't as long as I wanted. It never is, but it was enough. Enough to make him a felon, enough to strip him of his position, enough to make every door that used to open for him suddenly slam shut. Valor Front's board ousted him. They installed an interim CEO. They announced sweeping reforms. Would it all stick? I didn't know. Corporations are like hydras. You cut off one head, another grows. But I knew one thing. He would never again stand at a podium, waving his hands over veterans' lives like he owned them. The night after the sentencing, I went back to that restaurant. The same one where, over a plate of salmon, he'd called me a failed soldier. It looked the same. Same tasteful lighting, same chalkboard menu, different waiter. I asked to see the manager. "Is Miguel still working here?" I asked. He smiled. "He graduated last year, actually. Got a job as a paramedic." My chest warmed. Of course he did. As I turned to leave, the manager hesitated. "You're Hannah, right?" I frowned. "Have we met?" He shook his head. "No, but that night, after your dinner, people filmed it, the waiters saluting you, you standing up to that guy. It went around like veteran Facebook. We all know who you are." Heat crept up my neck. "Great," I muttered. "My worst night is a meme." "A good meme," he said. "One where the good guy wins." "Good girl," I corrected automatically. Then with a small smile, "Good woman." I walked out into the night. The air smelled of rain. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey ma'am, heard the news. If you're ever in the back of my ambulance, I promise to return the favor." "Miguel," I laughed, really laughed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't sound bitter. Was my revenge perfect? No. It cost me. I lost the woman I thought I'd build a life with. I lost my naive belief that good intentions were enough. I lost the illusion that I could live a quiet, disconnected civilian life and let the past stay in the past. But I gained something too. I gained a sense that I could fight without a uniform, that I could stand up even shaking in rooms where I was outnumbered and outmoneyed and still make a dent. I gained the knowledge that men like Richard Hayes aren't gods. They're just people with paper shields and clay feet. And I gained the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the next time someone like him thinks about calling a woman like me a failed soldier over dinner, he might remember the headline with his own name under the word guilty. Do I still have nightmares? Yes. Do I still flinch at loud noises? Sometimes. Do I still wake up some mornings feeling like a fraud, like I didn't do enough, like I left my people behind? Absolutely. But when that voice whispers failure, I have something to answer it with now. Not just medals or commendations or Miguel's salute, but the image of a rich man in a courtroom listening as a judge reads his sentence, while veterans in the gallery watch and know that, for once, the system bent in their favor. I'm not a failed soldier. I'm a woman who went to war twice. Once overseas with a rifle and a medic bag, and once at home with a flash drive and a lawyer and a stubborn refusal to stay quiet. In both wars, I lost things I loved. In both, I saw people at their worst and their best. And in both, in the end, I stood my ground. That's my revenge. Not that he went to prison. Not that his company may never fully recover. Not that his name is now whispered with a hint of scandal instead of reverence. My real revenge is this. He tried to break me, to make me small, to turn me into his cautionary tale. Instead, I turned him into mine.